Well, today I want to talk about parades. We've all seen parades, but have you ever marched in a parade? A few. Have any of you ever, how about this? Have any of you ever been on a float in a parade? Oh, yeah? Uh-huh. So you were someone special in a parade. Well, there's a big difference between observing a parade and participating in one. But first, let's think about what a parade is for in the first place. So a parade is a celebration of some kind. It can be a commemoration of something like Independence Day, or it could be that we are looking forward to something. Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade in New York, it's all about kicking off the season leading up to Christmas, so I suppose it's about shopping. Uh, it is sponsored by a department store, after all. And of course, the parade can be held to honor someone or a group of people. The ticker tape parade, a conquering hero. I remember uh, back when flying into space was something new, when astronauts got parades. And it's funny, being in a parade feels a lot different than observing one. For one thing, if you're in a parade, the scenery does not change quite as much. It might seem like the opposite would be true since you're moving, after all. But while it is true that you're moving forward if you're in a parade, at the same time, you are effectively stuck in one place in relation to all the other people around you who are also in the parade. You're moving in a block. So as you move along, you can see the scenery off to either side change, the buildings, the crowd. But let's say you're in a marching band, or you're marching alongside other soldiers or veterans or people from your civic organization, or even if you're riding in a float on a car doing this, you're still with other people who are going the same speed that you are, and you may all be even wearing the same uniform, and you're playing or singing the same song, probably over and over again as you proceed. It's a pattern that is not supposed to be broken. Not much room for spontaneity in a parade. So that means that whatever the reason for a parade, there's always a certain parade etiquette to be observed. Parades are one of those things that we appreciate, partly because we know what to expect of them. And when things do not go according to plan, according to the rules, things can get interesting. I was in the marching band in high school, and there was one parade I'll never forget because it defied expectations. It was to mark 4th of July, and as we marched along the main downtown street, Congress Avenue in Austin, Texas, we were led by our drum major, who was wearing this big, ridiculous, furry, tall hat and carrying a silver baton, and a whistle was in his mouth, and he was strutting like a peacock, which pretty much summed up his personality. Everything was going according to plan when, about halfway through the parade route, a young man darted out from the crowd lining the street, and he began to march right in front of our drum major. Although this young man wasn't so much marching as he was boogieing and dancing and spinning around, and not always in rhythm to the music that we were playing. This clearly irritated our drum major, who trotted up next to the guy and yelled at him to get out of the way and go back to the sidewalk where he belonged. But the young man did not obey these instructions. According to the rules of that parade, he was not sticking to the script. He was breaking every rule. He kept dancing around like a free spirit. And at first, I could see him up there. I was irritated too. What was that guy thinking? But then it struck me just as kind of weird. And then it became funny. And then it became wonderful. The longer that he went ahead of us, it was obvious he was a pretty good dancer. And the crowd absolutely loved it. They were cheering for him. And after a couple blocks, though, a police officer came, escorted the guy back into the crowd of spectators. So order was restored. Things went back to normal. Boring, but more of what you expect in a proper parade. And our drum major was happy because he was again once the center of attention, at least in his own mind. But I would have been happy for that young man to have kept marching and dancing along with us all the way. When you're one of many in a parade, all doing the same thing, it's nice enough. It can feel like you're doing the right thing, the expected thing. But to be out there by yourself, not in the uniform that everyone expects, literally dancing to the beat of a different drummer, that takes courage, takes creativity, takes taking a risk. Most of us, including the people in the crowd that day, as much as we like parades and all their uniformity, we can also appreciate the individual who stands out, the one with courage and imagination and improvisation, the one who breaks the rules and maybe helps us think beyond those expectations. So there is a certain parade we remember today when Jesus rode into Jerusalem. The image of that parade is so ingrained after years of hearing about it and reenacting it. It's one of those stories it's difficult to reimagine. It was chock full of symbolism. The kind of animal that Jesus rode, the palm branches, the words that were being shouted by the crowd, all of that meant something. It came from the playbook of what you do when a new king arrives to take control of the capital city. But there were others, the people who were actually in control, who thought this parade was a sad and disrespectful and ridiculous demonstration, and so they told Jesus just that. They said to him, "Tell your followers to shut up. This is not a legitimate parade. And you, Jesus, you're way out of line encouraging these poor people to behave like fools." In other words, they were saying, when the real Messiah comes, it's not going to look like this ragtag collection of hillbillies from the backwater of Galilee, hollering their heads off and dancing wildly with no sense of order, decorum. It'll be a proper parade with a big band, lots of soldiers and fancy banners fluttering in the breeze. So stop giving these people hope, Jesus. Stop acting that way. Really now. This is neither the time nor the place. And Jesus responds, even if I stop their singing, the rocks and stones will start their own singing. Because you cannot control the time or the place. You think you can, but you can't. In other words, God doesn't work according to our plans or according to our needs for order and uniformity and sticking to the script of our expectations. When God puts on a parade, it looks like people rejoicing the way they're going to rejoice. And one way to look at the Palm Sunday parade is how that one brief episode reveals the difference, the basic overall conflict between the gospel that Jesus proclaimed and lived out, and on the other hand, the way the organized religion and the powers that be understood the way things ought to work, the proper way. Now, for his part, Jesus was consistently saying and demonstrating how hopeless it was to ever put any limits at all on God's love and God's power. He insisted that not only is placing any limits on God, not our prerogatives, not our business, it's a waste of energy and it's counter to God's intentions. But the people in power, being in power, both religious and civic power, were operating under the illusion that God only works in certain reliable ways, that God only loves and accepts certain people, duh, and that there are rules and regulations you must follow, or else you're way out of bounds. You're off the team. There are distinct lines, and you cannot color outside those lines. There's only one way to hold a parade. You cannot dance around in front of the drum major and call that a legitimate parade. People who have no right cannot sing Hosanna, and they cannot wave palm branches and make fools of themselves. That's why it always takes a lot of courage whenever we feel like dancing to our own drummer. Winnie Lim works in the software industry. She's a programmer and developer of computer games. And as innovative as we might think that industry is, and I suppose we like to think that, especially in this area, in many cases, there are still certain expectations of what it means to work in software development. For one thing, it's still dominated largely by men, and Winnie is a woman. Although she wears her hair very short, she does not wear makeup, she does not wear dresses or business suits or high heels. She's very short and slight, and even though she's in her 30s, she could pass for a teenager. Ethnically, she's Chinese. And because of her rather neutral appearance, a lot of folks really don't know at first glance if she's male or female. Now, she's written about her experience and how early in her career she did attempt to fit in by wearing her hair long, wearing makeup, wearing clothes and shoes that would match all the expectations of what is acceptable. And she told herself it was a trade-off, that, sometimes we just have to do a lot of the things that we don't like in order to get the things that we want. But she writes that in pretending to be someone she was not, she felt as if her soul was disintegrating. So Winnie basically went into hiding. She worked from home where she could be herself. And she was successful and valued for her work, but she realized that by hiding, she was helping to perpetuate something that was wrong, not only in the software industry, but in our culture. That to be taken seriously and to fit in and to succeed, you've got to match a profile that everyone expects. And she wrote, it takes courage to be ourselves, a lot of hard work, a lot of self-awareness, but we're continually building a world that other people live in. And that means at every step of the road, we need to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want for our neighbors and for our children? Do we want a world where they have to disown their beautiful personalities just to fit in? She says, perhaps it's not too audacious to dream of a world where people can be whoever they truly are, and they no longer have to doubt if they are worthy. The Palm Sunday story, I think it's really a parable hiding in plain sight about the courage to be ourselves and to know that we are loved and accepted by God anyway. It's an object lesson to churches of any kind, including this church, about how expectations of what is proper or not can become so ingrained that those attitudes, those traditions can be more important than listening to and embracing God's creative spirit. The parade that Jesus held long ago, I believe, is still in progress. And it's always a march and a dance and a demonstration that will defy expectations. And we are all invited to join that celebration, to add our own distinct gifts and talents and humanity, to be creative and to be courageous, even be what others would call disruptive, to ensure that our church is always a place where those words that we recite every Sunday, that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. That those words are not just something we aspire to, no, but they're something that we see reflected in our members and in our neighbors that we serve. So that all of us who march to a different drummer know and affirm that we are always, always loved and called worthy by God.